What's up, Madridistas? Happy December 4th. This is your host, Kian Sobani. Look, I know there's not a whole lot to be happy about right now. Real Madrid are not playing well. We lose again, but regardless, we're going to have a lot of fun on Friday night. And if you're a Madridista in Toronto, you want some like real solid therapy, like beyond this actual podcast virtually, and you're in Toronto, we're going to play some pickup footy. We're going to do a podcast Friday night. That's literally in 2 days. In 2 days, we're going to be in Toronto doing a podcast, giving away stuff, and playing pickup footy. If you want to come in 2 days in Toronto, this is it. You have no other time to book. RSVP by clicking the link in the show notes. We want to give a quick shout out to tacsports.ca, who are hosting our podcast in Toronto. If you have an academy you need to enroll your kids in, whether it's football or another sport, you want top of the tier coaching, tacsports.ca, especially if you're in Toronto, you want to make sure you enroll your children there. Thank you so much for hosting our podcast on Friday. Very much looking forward to playing some pickup footy with you guys and raising some money for sick kids in Toronto. Also, Christmas is coming up. You know what's up, moji-mates.com. Today we're rocking Fede Valverde, who unfortunately did give away Real Madrid's second goal, but nevertheless, Fede Valverde for life. Love this one. If you want this and many other shirts like this with your favorite player, go to moji-mates.com, moji-mates.com, and use code MM15 off. Every single Managing Madrid podcast listener gets a 15% discount upon checkout. Moji-mates.com. Use code MM15 off. And let's bring in Jose Perez. Let's get this post-game show started. Let's break down another L.
Nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First-rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Hello and welcome to the Managing Madrid podcast. We're recording this about 10 minutes after Real Madrid lose to Athletic Club at San Mamés 2-1. Joining me is Jose Perez. Jose, first thoughts.
Yay, I love football. I love watching my football team.
Well, we can start anywhere you want, Jose. We can start with Mbappe. We can start with the team's defense. We can start with the team's offense. I'm happy for you to lead the first segment of this podcast.
Okay, so let's see. Where do we start with this? Well, in a way, it's the same it's been for this season, and so it's many of the same issues we have talked throughout the entire season. So I guess we start a bit with the lineups. With Athletic, no big surprises. Their main question is always, do you put Berenguer up front or do you put Guruceta? Because Berenguer usually tends to be the impact sub. Then also their fullbacks, that was also a bit of a question, but anyways, like it's a pretty standard Athletic lineup. Then I guess for us, I think the interesting choices were, okay, Tchouaméni is coming back. Do you put him at center back or do you put him in midfield? The decision was to put him in midfield, which I think it's a show of trust in the current Asensio and Rudiger partnership, which I think is it. Let's just say we've criticized Ancelotti a lot, but this is one of those decisions that I think it's worth standing for. I think in a team that's struggling a lot, Rudiger and Asensio are probably the most reliable part. Well, aside and Courtois, of course, like that triangle is probably the most reliable part of the team at the moment. And I think that was the main things that stood out for me in terms of lineup. Today was at least to me, looked more like a 4-4-2. So Jude, rather than being more central, it was more on the left side. And then, at least at the beginning, you had Mbappe and Rodrigo as kind of the strikers, with Rodrigo more on the right. And then towards the second half, Rodrigo moved more to the left. And that's kind of the setup. Then how this actually played, kind of disastrous in the sense that I think this is one of those games that shows how much quality this team has lost on the ball. I mean, this is a team that 5 years ago, you had Ramos, you had Marcelo, you had Kroos, you had a lot of players that could help you get out of pressure situations. And right now you look at, say, kind of the holding midfielders in the defensive line, there's nowhere near that amount of quality on the ball. And that means that a team that presses you is going to be able to press you more easily. And you can see it today. There were a lot more struggles trying to play out of the back. Maybe another kind of coach can build a structure where these kinds of players can find ways to pass forward, but Ancelotti is not that kind of coach. So hence our current situation.
1 year ago, we played in San Mames. And if you remember, that was Jude Bellingham heroics. Like, that was during that stretch early on in the season. And look, games in San Mames, I don't need them to be this absolute orchestra. I don't need it to be this beautiful, free-flowing football for 90 minutes. I understand it's going to be a grind. Last year, we went into San Mames, and that was a game where we had, by default, because of the injuries, we had to actually go out and put out all four of those young, dynamic midfielders. It was so Tchouameni, Camavinga, Bellingham, and Fede Valverde. And it was actually really helpful to combat Athletic Club in San Mames with the physicality of those four midfielders. And you fast forward a year later, a year and change. And again, I don't expect it to be this beautiful, free-flowing football. I thought, for what it's worth, Ancelotti prioritized defensive structure over offensive domination, and I'm okay with that. I think our defense held up pretty well. But going back to your point about on-ball deficiencies, where we actually conceded chances was not because of necessarily individual one-on-one defending. That was pretty good. Asensio, Rudiger, Fran Garcia was horrible on the ball, but actually was good with his individual duels. Fede Valverde tracking, Jude tracking, that was fine. Ceballos tracking. Where we really shot ourselves in the foot was the amount of times we just carelessly gave the ball away. Fran Garcia, a ton. Lucas Vazquez, a ton. Tchouameni's just defensive awareness continues to be really poor. He picks up the wrong man in transition. Sometimes he doesn't pick up anyone at all. And it puts a big load on Asensio and Antonio Rudiger. Where we really, really labored today, apart from our on-ball abilities and our ball progression and facing Atletic's press, which really wasn't even that aggressive, by the way. Mm-hmm. Our offense looked toothless. And there's so much onus on Jude Bellingham once again to do everything. He's the guy who has to be the outlet for the center backs and the midfielders. He's the guy who has to receive the ball between the lines and play the right pass, the final ball into the box, the through ball. He's the one who has to crash the box and score rebounds. He is the only one who's an aerial threat in the front five. So there's so much on his shoulders. Rodrigo was a really good line breaker. He had moments in this game where he was very proactive in breaking lines. We need more from Kylian Mbappe. And I'm not just saying that because of the missed penalty. I'm just saying he's just not involved. He's not as involved as he should be. When he is involved, he has zero confidence. And it's, you and I and Sid and Mehedi did that post-game show from Anfield. We were talking about, because Mbappe was a huge talking point from that game. I'm pretty amazed that we've come this far in the Mbappe decline, because early on in the season, we weren't like over the moon with Mbappe's performances, but we also kind of agreed that he's not a main problem, right? Like, he's finding his feet, all this stuff. Now we're in December, and he's gone from not being the problem, but just someone that has to improve, to like actually becoming one of the main problems. And the penalty situation, like, we know if you're you're a striker that needs confidence. Taking a penalty when you're not confident can have actually disastrous reverse effects of absolutely eviscerating any confidence you have left. The body language with him stepping up to that penalty was really poor. He struck it terribly. I'm willing to bet that if you put my 7-year-old son Luca out there, I think he would have tested the goalkeeper a little bit more. It was the perfect penalty for a goalkeeper to face. There was no run up. There was no disguised shot, faking one way, going the other way. There was no Jude Bellingham exaggerated stutter step. It was just, let me just hit it right into your arms. Perfect height for you. He had the ball on the left wing a couple times, Jose, and he's running on Gorosabel. And Gorosabel's like, yeah, this is easy. You want to try to explode past me? Go for it. You don't have any explosiveness left. I'm going to just steal this from you. So we're here now, Jose. We talked about it after the Liverpool game. I don't know if anything is different since then. It just seems like we're having the same conversation, minus what happened in between, which was the game against Getafe, where he scored a golazo and then missed a bunch of chances.
Yes. And this is also the feeling I got when watching this game. It's like I'm feeling like I'm going a bit through the Liverpool script again, because you have another team that can press relatively well, and then that makes it harder for you to build up, and then the attack is absolutely toothless. So with Rodrigo, I think Rodrigo was a very welcome return, because it's nice to have another one of these kind of connective tissue players again. So it was because it is the line breaking, it is the ball carrying, the dribbling, but also the fact that he usually tries to provoke combinations with other players, which is quite useful. But still, but maybe on the end product side, I was missing a bit more. Then with Mbappe, what can be said at this point? Because nothing, like, it's again the whole reason this guy was signed was precisely so that he could come out in these situations and create goals from nothing. But currently, like, even if you fed him the ball in the right position, you still wouldn't get the goal anyway. So it is very difficult for an attack, especially an attack that doesn't have, how do I put it? Real Madrid has a coach that always tries to rely a bit more on players making certain decisions. And it takes, and of course, because he lets the best players in the world take decisions, that's kind of the foundation of his system. But if those players are not doing well, then you have no structure. And again, if you don't have a Toni Kroos running the midfield, then you have no build-up structure. And if you don't have a Vinicius or an Mbappe who is in good form, then it's going to be very difficult to build an offensive structure. And that's kind of the Real Madrid we've been seeing lately. That you see them and there's not much of an attack. There's not much of a what to do in attack. And you don't get also the only one who's giving those individual moments is, for the most part, Vinicius. Occasionally you'll get some from Jude. So that's the current situation with the attack. And what we're seeing is that that's not enough to beat like top level sides, and even say sides that are not elite but still really good, like Athletic. Because this script felt very similar to, like, they're not at the same level as Liverpool, but this script felt pretty similar to the Liverpool game.
We have super chats racking up, and Ancelotti is speaking in the press conference right now. Before we dive into all that, I wanted to ask you this question, and I'm hoping you don't know the answer, because then it would kind of ruin the fun. But if you had to guess how many non-penalty goals Mbappe has since last March, how many is it? So that's over 40 games.
I'm gonna make the guess. Let's put it at 7.
Okay. You undershot it. I don't blame you. It's 13.
Okay.
So this mental thing is not just this season thing, is my point. It's not probably not just a new league, new team, new pressure thing. This can be traced back to last season. It would be far less concerning to me if it was just a this season thing. But there might be something else that is completely destroying him mentally. Quite frankly, he just looks distraught. So I don't know. So Ancelotti said something interesting in the press conference that I'd just like to expand on a little bit. He's talking about, someone asked him about Fede Valverde's mistake on Athletic's second goal. And Ancelotti says Fede, like Kylian, is sad and disappointed, but Fede should not be touched. He's a great player. Mistakes are made and we have to look to the next game. And of course, what he means by that is that we're not going to just pile on and start talking about Fede Valverde's mistake. I agree with him in this sense that this particular game, I was amazed it took Athletic 80 minutes to finally capitalize on one of our giveaways. Careless giveaways that were happening proficiently from especially Fran Garcia and Lucas Vazquez, our two fullbacks, who were disastrous on the ball. And it could have been one of them. It could have been anyone who was making mistakes in this game. And Fede obviously makes a mistake and he scores. I'm not excusing Fede Valverde. But what I am saying, I guess, is that there are certain players who are just working their ass off. In Fede Valverde's case, he's racking up the most minutes of anyone on the team. He does travel to South America for these international breaks. At some point, and he's also has to exert more energy because he's covering for Lucas Vazquez on that side. So again, not to excuse him, but there are kind of levels of blame, I guess, to pass around. I also think Jude Bellingham again was fantastic. And obviously, scores the rebound, but is doing so much important work all over the field in this game again and every game. Defensive reads were fantastic. He was tracking Iñaki on the wing. He was tracking Sunset. Anytime Sunset would get into dangerous positions, counter pressing was good. One of the only constants in this season is Jude Bellingham, no question. And what if you want to come to the podcast, you have to say hello. Say hello.
Hello.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Okay. You can sit here if you want. So yeah, Jose, you can take over.
Yes. Yeah. So going. Well, actually, talking a bit, saying at least nice things about Jude and Fede, who are maybe some of the players we can say nice things about for this one. Because even it is cruel that Fede made the mistake for all the reasons that you mentioned. It's cruel that Fede made the mistake because let's just say he's also. I wouldn't say he had a great game, but there were still some good moments. There were still some good passes. He's been one of the reliable players for the team this season. So when things are not going necessarily well, so it kind of sucks that it had to happen to him. And I would add that Atletic's strategy, I think today had two parts. The part in pressing was a bit first of all, try to make Madrid not be able to go through the middle and then force them to pass through their fullbacks and try to provoke mistakes there. So that was part. So I do think that the turnover, the potential turnovers or ball losses from fullbacks that was part of the strategy for Athletic. And the other side that I noticed is that they were very normally Athletic, especially now that they have Sunset and these kinds of players, they like to play more through the center. But this time around, they stayed very direct and very playing on the wings, because what they were hoping each time is to send the ball behind our fullbacks. And try to see, for example, if they can get Nico to outrun Lucas, and they try to get into those situations as much as possible. So that's the strategy I noticed from them. Again, this is another thing where you think, okay, 5 years ago we had Marcelo and Carvajal at the fullbacks, and it's focusing so much on your fullbacks might have been a strategy that didn't work 5 years ago. It certainly works now, given the fullbacks on display. It was another game that was a bit complicated for Fran because, again, Fran, while he's been doing relatively well this season, you see his limitations against an opponent that presses like Athletic. That's really where you start seeing like, okay, where his ball controls are a bit lacking, where his response under pressure is a bit lacking. And we saw that in this game today. And then with regards to Jude and Fede, they are doing a lot of work defensively due to, because Real Madrid basically usually plays with two strikers that don't do much defensive work. So they are the ones who have to be compensating all the time. They have to be moving up and doing some pressing sometimes, but they also have to track back and help their respective fullbacks. So they put in quite a shift defensively.
What was your take on Athletics? Was it first goal? Yeah, first goal, where the cross comes in from the left side. You had the Courtois bobble. What was your read on what broke down there?
For the first goal?
Yeah. So the Guruzeta goal. No, sorry, the Berenguer goal.
That one, I'm trying to remember.
So it was the Courtois. He can't hold on to it. There's a rebound.
Oh yeah. Like the one where there's a rebound. I do think that's one situation where, of course, you. And this goes, and like it is kind of cruel now that I think about it, that these things happen. Like the two goals kind of happen from kind of mistakes from players who have been relatively reliable, because this is like a box defending mistake, and with Asensio and Rudiger, our box defending has been quite reliable lately. So I do think it's a situation where, like, of course, you're looking at it and then you see Asensio's like, why are you stopping here? And of course, that gets kind of Courtois mixed up. Then usually Courtois, when he bounces this away, it usually goes to the side rather than to the front. So that was but I think he wasn't fully prepared to get that one. So it's just a bit of a mess / miscommunication there, where everyone just got really confused over that cross. And of course, the cross was also like aimed at a position that just caused like a miscommunication among the center backs and among Courtois, and we ended up with that confusion, basically.
Yeah, so you're right, I think, in pointing out that some of the things that cost us from a defensive standpoint in this game were from players that have been really reliable, and it's hard to kind of ask them to hang their head when, unfortunately, they just kind of wrong place at the wrong time. Asensio also lets the run in behind him, and I thought he had a pretty good game today in that. Like, if you look at the amount of, like, if you look at Atletic's main threats, which is Iñaki and Nico, Sunset, and obviously they have many, like Berenguer as a threat. But, like, I think between, like, Sunset and Nico and Iñaki, we did a good job with our individual duels on all three of those guys to limit their influence. And in that particular sequence, was it Iñaki, I think, who cuts in and makes that cross, and Asensio doesn't get the read right. It goes in behind him. Courtois, it just kind of like bounces off Courtois, and of course, no one's also defending the rebound there as well. So Ancelotti said after the game, Jose, that he felt that it was not too late, basically, to increase the intensity once they conceded. So he says, okay, my son just took my camera. Okay, hold on. Let me switch cameras here. I got to fix to this under pressure. All right, cool. So, yeah, he said basically it wasn't too late when they started to increase the intensity, and they tied the game in the 78th minute. I don't know. Do you think that Real just should have approached this differently? Obviously, we lost the game, so there's an obvious answer to that. But it's more like I'm curious to know, like, what you would have done if there was a more proactive approach. Is what I'm asking.
It's very complicated because, of course, I would prefer a more proactive approach, but we don't really have a coach that does proactive approaches. So like, it's hard to ask Ancelotti to do a proactive approach because it's just something that he doesn't really do. And I think the thing that I find a bit more annoying is, in any case, like the substitutions. Like, I was kind of yelling at the TV. It's like, why is Ceballos leaving now and not Tchouaméni after the game he's having? Because if you're under because of course it's not like Ceballos was out there transcending or anything, but he was more reliable under pressure, had a couple decent sequences under pressure. So in that situation, you probably needed him more than you needed a Tchouaméni who was making like turnover after turnover. So that was the first thing where, okay, we're going back. And again, this is just classic Ancelotti, right? There are certain players who he trusts, and clearly Tchouaméni is one of those. So he's gonna stay. He's gonna stay on no matter what. So there's that one. And then, as usual, you'd like to have more like, well, Mbappe is not going to get substituted, whether we like it or not, whether we think it's right or not. It's just not going to happen. And then then the other substitutions that always come a bit late. But this is the usual situation. So I don't know. There wasn't much done. Let's just say there wasn't much done to change things, at least after the first after that penalty. After the penalty, you could see the team at least taking more initiative. So stuff happened, but there still wasn't really. It still wasn't enough to consistently create chances.
I just think this is one of the greatest nights of my life, because not only did Real just humiliate me, not my son just turned off the lights, so it's like this eerie. I'm in the dark now. I'm in the dark. All right, he turned it on. He's turning it on and off. So I honestly don't think that any pressure that Mbappe is going through is anything compared to what I'm going through in this moment. This is, if I can transcend this, I can transcend anything. So you also mentioned the subs, and I don't know if you pointed this particular one out. I know you pointed out, Ceballos' kind of place on the field and other things that happened in this game, but there's this kind of eternal question about, should Mbappe be on the field? Is this a case of like in basketball where you let a player shoot through the shooter slump and get their confidence back, or does it need to be benched? And my thing is, like, whether it's right or wrong, you can talk about should Mbappe be benched. The other reality is he's not going to get benched. So that's just not going to happen. And I'm not here to point out whether that's right or wrong, but I'm just pointing out that that's the situation. You're not going to bench Kylian Mbappe. It's just not going to happen. So we're in this situation. And I completely almost forgot about this chance as well. 58th minute. This is the cutback from Rodrigo, who does great work. He cuts it back. And this is when, this was Jude Bellingham is like right here behind him. And the commentators are making a big deal of like he should have left it for Jude. But in my opinion, that's a correct decision for a striker to get on the end of that and try to score it. Unfortunately, of course, the shot was terrible as well. So, yeah, we're in this situation now that he's going to play. And again, this goes back to something I said again after the Liverpool game, Jose. He doesn't defend. For the majority of his career, it's okay for him to not defend. It's okay for him to have weaknesses behind the ball, because he was just so elite at everything, it didn't matter. And at what point does it just become a liability if he's playing like this and not defending? So this is the situation we're in.
And in the end, like, of course, like the only way to get the players' confidence back is to keep playing, to keep shooting until stuff goes in. At the same time, we are really at the point where you have to evaluate, okay, at what point is that more important than just getting the result, at least in the short term? Because I do think, of course, long term for this team, it's better if Mbappe gets his confidence back, because then that would solve a bunch of issues. But at least now in the short term, if the team keeps trying to do that, we're gonna keep running into this issue. And honestly, like I can excuse doing this a couple times and see what happens, but already on the second time, I'm already starting to get for example, on the and by this I mean the penalty situation, because I do wonder because I mean he gave the penalty to Jude against Getafe precisely because he doesn't feel the confidence. So at this point, in a way, for me, it's almost like 3 misses, because it's like the one against Getafe was him actively choosing not to do it because he doesn't have the confidence. So at this point, we really have to talk. This guy shouldn't be taking the penalties right now. And I was willing to let it go over one miss, but now it's really a situation where it's hard to justify him being the designated taker.
I think one of the more striking images that came out of that Getafe game was the scene where Rodrigo is taking the penalty, and then Carlos like, no, give it to Kylian, and then Rodrigo kind of asks him, "Do you have confidence?" It's like, whoa. It's like kind of like gives you a glimpse of like how shot his confidence actually is when the players gotta know about it. All right, so we have a bunch of super chats wrapped up. You can say hello one more time.
Hello, Leatherface.
Say Hala Madrid.
Hello, Molly.
All right. So we're going to read the Mbappe super chats all together because some of it will get repetitive. So thank you guys for sending in these Mbappe questions and of course other questions. There's a lot of super chats. Jose, my proposal is we'll read the Mbappe ones all at once, and then we can kind of answer them collectively. Okay, that makes sense.
Works for me.
A.Supertramp says it's time to bench Mbappe for 2 games. I think he needs it too. And then Avunu says, I'm done with Mbappe. Ancelotti needs to coach. First half, we could not beat the press. We had no control, gave the ball away so cheaply all game. What is our offensive plan? Only Brahim was a good sub. And Nishlish Patel says, if this loss is Mbappe's fault, it's equally Fede's fault. Mbappe sucking over this season just adds to the bias of this loss being more of this.
Look at like this.
His fault.
Hello.
So, Jose, do you want to address those first?
Yes. I mean, we've already been addressing them throughout the podcast. If this loss is Mbappe's fault, it's equally Fede's fault. I mean, the thing with Fede is that I think he could make a couple more of these mistakes and people wouldn't mind it as much because 1, Fede has been reliable, and 2, we know he's always putting the defensive shift. So in those at least in those situations, we know that whatever mistake Fede does or whatever things he doesn't do, he still compensates with the defense. With Mbappe, going back to what Kian was mentioning, if he doesn't score, you have nothing. There's no defense, and right now there's not even dribbling and 1v1 ability to change games. So if there's no scoring, there's really nothing to hold on to. That's the one thing. And then, with regards to benching Mbappe, it's like we said, it's not gonna happen. But we are at the point where, considering that he doesn't give you anything else in defense, 1v1, etc., it's probably worth considering. It's worth considering, of course. I mean, if this were a regular player, would have been benched weeks ago.
Yeah, I just don't see that happening. There's a couple more Mbappe ones actually that came in. We'll take those really quick. Man like Mimo says, Mbappe domino effect. He is the root of our problems. The player that covers Mbappe lack of fight then needs to be covered, and this just causes so much space. Bellingham doing slavery shifts for Mbappe. And let me see if we can take one more Mbappe one, then we'll kind of move on from Mbappe for this episode. Jav Mars says, crazy how we selling Rodrigo to keep Mbappe. Well, that I don't know where you got that last part from, but that's not going to happen. So, I may have missed some of the stuff you said. So I don't mean to be repetitive, Jose, when I finally shipped off my son for good until next podcast. But I think the most apparent version of it was in the Liverpool game. Not so much today, although today was problematic, but the Liverpool game was shockingly bad in the sense that the amount that Bellingham and Fede had to do, and Kamavinga before he left injured, they had to do to cover up for Mbappe just not pressing or Mbappe giving the ball away and not making any effort to win it back. And all of a sudden, you have all these players who are already overtaxed. Bellingham and Fede Valverde playing every second imaginable and covering so much ground. Now have to cover more ground because Mbappe just is a liability on that end. So, I don't know. Next podcast we're gonna log on to Jose and talk about this again. I'm assuming. I don't know how this gets better. I hope it does, but there's only so many realistic things we can say about his, like his ability to recover from this.
Yeah, and the thing is that especially when Vinicius is there, you can say, okay, Mbappe is not the biggest problem, but he can be I really like the phrasing I heard from a Spanish journalist of like, okay, Mbappe is not the biggest problem, but he can be the biggest solution, because if he gets unformed, then that solves a lot of issues. But right now, without Vinicius, it is kind of a major problem because the guy you had to rely on the most for offense is not there. And now the most natural guy to lead is Mbappe, and he's not providing that leadership. So the leadership is done by a Jude that right now has to put in like 10 different shifts throughout the rest of the field. So he cannot. So, which is why I keep arguing that right now the best solution without Vini is to just trying to free Jude from defensive duties and trying to give him a more offensive role. I think that's probably the most likely way to get out of this slump and score more goals.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I have one more point about Mbappe, but I think I'm going to save it for later in the podcast in case it doesn't come up again during the super chats. Mig says we need a lot of things: a new center back, a new right back, better gameplay and rotations, parentheses, new coach, question mark, less gifted goals, better pressing and passing as a team, and a mega bucks forward that isn't having a mental breakdown. Geez, that sounds like an entirely new club, organization, and a new team. Makes this a lot of things. Look, I think we would all agree on most of that stuff. We need a new center back, although Raul Asensio has lessened the need for that to some regard, but I think we still need some depth there. We definitely need a new right back. We definitely need better ball progression. We probably need to incorporate more players and reward players who are playing well, who are not playing as much. We definitely need to take care of possession more, stop gifting goals, better pressing. I mean, we don't press at all. And a forward that isn't having a mental breakdown. It's hard for me to look at that list and be like, I disagree.
Yeah, same.
Dipanjan Chatterjee says Carlos should take shit Chouameni, Modric, Fran with him. It's harsh. I don't know. I have no comment on it.
My only right now, I mean, the only thing I do is that I'd ban all the French players except Kamavinga from starting.
Kamavinga, his absence was just one of those things that
for this game it hurts because he is like the one guy who could best get out of this pressure.
Yeah, and I just think it like would have been a bigger story if there wasn't so much going on with the club right now. But he was so good against Liverpool in that first half. He was just finding his feet. He's been one of our better players based on form since he's come back, and he's just out again. Huge loss, no question. For what it's worth, I'm not disagreeing that all these players have been bad. Mbappe's been poor. Chouameni's been poor. Modric has been kind of hit or miss, just clearly not what he used to be physically, and he's also not as good on the ball as he used to be, but he has moments, and it's hard to blame a 39-year-old guy who comes off the bench. Fran Garcia, our left back situation is pretty dire too right now, and even though we have two left backs. For what it's worth, Fran kind of had the inverse performance today where he was poor offensively, but he was good defensively, I thought. Back to Miggs, who says, and winning against Leganes and Getafe isn't a litmus test of turning things around for a club the stature of Real Madrid. Every major test we've had so far this season has been a failure. That's correct.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like that's been one of the more consistent things. Every time we've had a big one, it's just a failure.
Zafri says, been asking for us to take more shots. The one time we do, we score the rebound. Why do we not take more with all this talent? Can Carlo not see this? I'm a huge proponent of shot volume. I think it's an important thing to have. I think people underrate the importance of someone who can fire off a high volume of shots. And you saw it on the goal. And this goes back to Mbappe. And you were mentioning earlier, Jose, that Mbappe didn't take on the leadership role in Vinicius' absence. And that's something that I think we've all been disappointed about. You know, I was talking about that he needs to be more alpha and he needs to take on the game by the scruff of the neck more. And of course, with Vinny out, this is an opportunity to do that. And this goes back to his confidence or shot is completely shot, but he needed to have a more leadership role. That shot that led to the Bellingham goal was the best thing he did all game. And it was a good shot. Like, it tested the goalkeeper. He fired it off quickly. And he's actually, maybe his best thing this season has actually been his long range shooting. He scored a couple goals from outside the box. The shot today was good that led to the Bellingham goal. Just more proactive stuff like that will be helpful. So I agree with you, Zafri. Nishlish is this is on the back of one of his earlier points about this being Mbappe's fault and him sucking this season. Just adds to the bias of this loss being more his fault. Nishlish says, "My point is, it's neither one's individual fault. We sucked as a team. Also, Athletic didn't have the game in their bag until the very end. Our defense." Miggs says Chouameni is a center back masquerading as a DM.
I don't think he'd do particularly well in any role right now. I'm not like, this is something I was thinking like at the beginning of the game. It's like right now I wouldn't take, given Asensio's current level, I wouldn't take Chouameni at center back right now.
I think Chouameni should not be starting if we have enough players healthy. Chouameni as a center back, though, is more encouraging based on the last year or so than his DM. It might be worth just sitting him down and be like, hey, you're entering the Ivan Helguera phase of your career now. You're entering the Fernando Hierro phase of your career. You're transitioning from DM to center back. Shayan Saha. I love these super chats because some of these super chats are just such 180s from the way we talk on the podcast regularly. Shayan says, does Florentino Perez watch our games? Sack this guy. Enough already. His press conferences are embarrassing. Solari can't be worse than this.
I'm just going to say, you always think that it cannot get worse. It can always get worse.
Jav says, sack Carlo for Solari. Endrick will finally be playing. Yeah, if Solari comes in, it's just going to be, let's pump in as many kids as possible. Avunu says Chouameni is becoming a defensive problem. I think Chouameni's main problem is that he just seems to just take plays off. I can't explain it. He does not seem to be aware of where the runners are, which people are running into the box behind him, how to properly make sure that zone 14 is shielded completely. It's an awareness thing with him that I didn't really see problematic 2 years ago. So I don't know what happened there.
It's a regression. Yeah.
Yeah. Another one who's going through some kind of mental funk. I don't know. Can't explain it. Nishlish says, you missed a context super chat from me while skimming through the Mbappe specific one. Nishlish, I think I've discovered the problem is that I think you're pressing enter after every sentence you write. If you just write it all into one super chat, you would not only save money, but I think we'd have the full context. Okay? Just keep that in mind. I think it's really difficult to keep track when there's so many different super chats from one person. Back to Miggs, who says, agreed, Camavinga, Jude, Fede, and Vinny are the leaders and saviors of this team right now. Any 11 on the pitch that doesn't include them looks outmatched and outclassed. These are the pillars. I think last season we had...
Well, and Rudiger, I would say. I mean, I am scared. Well, Rudiger and Courtois, but those are a given. Like, the moment either of these two also gets injured, I mean, I feel like in that Liverpool, for example, the difference in the Liverpool game compared to the Clásico was that Courtois was starting that one. Otherwise, we get another 4 against.
I think I've never been more excited for Vinicius Jr. to come back to the lineup. If I had a guarantee, like right now, Camavinga, Jude, Fede, and Vinny would just be healthy from New Year and on, I'd be the happiest person in the world. They're so important to everything we do. And, Jose, like, Vinny really masks a lot of our problems because he's just so great individually. For good or worse, you need him there to like kind of mask some of these holes and transcend the tactics. We've always kind of needed players like that in our recent history. You needed players to be so great to transcend it. And I remember something you said earlier in the podcast where you said Mbappe was kind of signed for these moments where the game isn't going well, like someone who can find a solution. And theoretically, he should be. Like, Peak Mbappe is a problem solver against low blocks, a problem solver against high lines, and just a player who has ingenuity. And you watch, for example, the game that we played against PSG a couple years ago and how much he just absolutely torched us. And that player just seems so long gone. If that player existed, you probably win today's game. You probably are top of the table. You're probably not 24th in the Champions League. And that's the player that Real Madrid thought they signed.
Yeah,
and if they don't get that version...
Right now we're in the opposite situation. We have to help him.
Yeah, which is draining our resources and
exactly,
our
which we're not
confidence.
in a position to do. This is another one of those things where like a lot of problems add up. If everything is going swimmingly, then you are in a situation where, okay, we can handle him being in this state and the team can kind of help him out in this state. But right now it's a situation where you need him to be the one doing the carrying instead of carrying him.
Relic says, it seems like a lack of structure, floating players, is making it difficult for the DM to keep up. Also, I think we will be just fine for this season. Hala Madrid. I love it.
Only optimism. I like the optimism.
Relic, if we turn it around, we're coming back to this super chat, bro. Enes Mahmoudi says, are we short in midfield creativity? How about we get creative midfielders and play Camavinga and Valverde at the wing-back position?
I keep hearing this from time to time, and I don't like it.
If we could just get Camavinga as the left CM, Fede as the right CM, and good fullbacks that would enable them to play in their best position, we'd be fine. In at least that, with that particular respect, at least. Tragic TV says, I like Asensio, but he pulls off his marker sometimes. Yeah, like some of those mistakes you might see from Asensio, I'm gonna just chalk up, like, charge it to the development game. Charge it to the development credit card, where like we saw Sergio Ramos go through so many growing pains until he became elite. Like, the cost benefit of analysis of Asensio has been like 99% good. So,
yeah, exactly. If you look at it from like a cost benefit perspective, like there's really not much more that we can ask for. We're looking at someone who, if he kept up this level of reliability, he can just be that consistent, third or fourth center back that we kind of lost with Nacho. If he could keep this up, so yeah, and that is something that's, let's just say, it's very hard to find players like that who can keep up a good level, but and still be mostly squad rotation. So I still think Real Madrid has to go. It's a bit of a complicated situation but I do think Real Madrid still has to go for a starting level center back, simply because we don't know how Alaba and Militao are going to come back from injuries. Yeah. So I still think Real Madrid should go for one, but already the appearance of Asensio solves a big issue we were going through at the moment. So but anyways, yes, he will make mistakes, and there have been mistakes. Like, I think, like, it's not like you can go with him and face and successfully face every top level opponent on the planet, but it's just a very reliable player for most situations. There will be mistakes, but honestly, even with those mistakes, you're not gonna get much complaints from me.
Listen, tomorrow, Leah and I are going to do a mailbag. So if you want to submit questions for Leah and I to answer, if you want to submit questions and then listen to our response to your question, go to patreon.com/managing Madrid or hit the memberships tab on this YouTube channel. You get access to our mailbag every week, plus way more. Leah and I will be doing the mailbag tomorrow. Jose and I will be back, I'm sure, as much as possible throughout the season. So, Jose, thank you for hopping on both after this game and the Liverpool game, where we had a lot of bad things to talk about. Yes. So thank you for putting up with that. Thank you to our listeners. I put the link to the Toronto event on the chat if you're watching this live. It's also in the show notes. We'll see you guys in Toronto in 2 days. And let's end with this. One super chat just came in at the buzzer. Mig says, if Mbappe continues his funk and needs to be benched, a front three with Endrick, or two, Vinny and Rodrigo, with Jude at the top of Carlos' midfield diamond.
Endrick is not fit to start right now. I think
he's not fit to start. What do you mean?
No, and not physically, but I mean, I don't think he's at the level.
He's ready?
Yeah, I don't think he's at the level where he should be starting. I think right now, in any case, if you bench Mbappe, it would be to go back to last year's solution.
I will say, like, if there was a world where you could bench Mbappe, the idea of just kind of like Brahim could take on an extra role, or just going back to last season's formation, would make sense. To remind everyone, last season we had a lot of struggles last season too. I know we won the double, but we also hopped on this podcast and we're quite critical of quite a few things too. But if that theoretically were to happen, you would probably improve your defense a little bit if you slotted in Brahim or just went back to last season's formation. All right, awesome. Thank you guys. We got to sign off. We got to log off here. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you guys tomorrow for our members. And thanks again, Jose. Appreciate you. Take care. Peace out.
All right. Take care, guys. See ya.